I'm John Davison, Group CIO for FCG, the First Central Group. And as Nick said, we are a motor insurer. We're about, I'll come on to the numbers in a second, but yeah, so we trade into the UK market. And what we do here in Guernsey is we are the technical outfit for the insurance group. So today we'll talk a little bit about data, or big data, more specifically, and the insight that it gives First Central, how we use that information from the sort of three angles. So yes, we're going to look at counter fraud. We'll also look at marketing insight and also the impact that it has on our pricing structure and the way that we do business. And then hopefully, if I don't run out of time, because I do get a little bit excited sometimes, we'll also look at some of the opportunities that we see here on Ireland with big data. So a little bit about First Central. We are the proud parent of the UK motor brand First Central, funnily enough. We describe ourselves as a technology and insurance group. Depends on who you ask. So that's how I would say it. Our chief underwriting officer will say insurance and technology, not the other way around. But either way, we are across 3 jurisdictions. So we've got 3 different independent businesses that operate the entire UK motor value chain. So we have a reinsurer here in Guernsey, Skyfire Re. We have a Gibraltar-based insurer and a UK distribution broker. We join all of these businesses together with a piece of in-house technology called Focus, which is our policy and claims administration system, and that's supplied as a service from here on Ireland. So I have a highly skilled team, I like to think, delivering technology services into our businesses, regardless of where they are. First Central, the brand, is about £220 million GWP, so a reasonable size. We got about 450,000 or so live customers, and 300,000 of those are new every year. So it's quite a churn in the market. And we reckon we're about 1.5% of the UK market, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a big old market. So we do all right. We trade through the comparison sites. So as Nick said, so we take data in from Money Supermarket, Confused, etc. That's almost our exclusive source of new business. And then we do some, what I think, quite clever things with that data to work out how to price that individual risk. So for us, our data has sort of 4 main uses. So we have our operating use, so running the business, so your standard reports, making sure you've got the right number of people in the contact centre, that kind of thing. Pricing, underwriting, so looking at the data being presented and working out what that means from a loss perspective. Counter fraud, so in a digital world, when you're online, you're 24/7, you've really got to watch our lovely customers and what they do to their data to try and manipulate their prices. And then finally, the marketing aspect. So this is a retail insurance company. We can't lose sight of the fact that we are retail. So we need to look at how we present ourselves, how our journey works, etc. So for First Central, data and technology are facilitation of change. They're not just a consequence. The way the group was structured when we first started the business 10 years ago was all about capital efficiency. So putting the right type of business in the right jurisdiction to manage our capital. But over the years, those decisions about how we structure ourselves have actually been informed and in many cases led by our technology and data. So back in 2012, the business moved into consumer lending. And we did that, one, because it was a good idea, but it was enabled by a piece of technology. We needed the lending componentry to behave in a certain way, which we couldn't buy. So we had to build it. So we're not frightened of doing that sort of thing. In 2013, we fundamentally shifted the way that our UK business works. So we can use some buzzwords and say we digitised or we digitalised. What we did was we opened up the traditional back office insurance offering out online. So it's not just about delivering a website, it's fundamentally changing the business processes. So it's removing those touches or making it so that when a user does need to touch a business process, it adds value. It's not just part of the process. And then later this year, so actually why I was late today, because I was on a conference call about it, we have a new claims component going live on the 30th of October, which we're expecting again to sort of revolutionise the way that this business processes claims. So if you trace each of those sort of seismic shifts, and they are seismic, they're not, not to be taken lightly, they all have a genesis in technology or data. And for us, the sort of the advent of more and more information and better processing means that we can remove some of the sort of traditional barriers that we had about how we make decisions as a business. We have much more information to help us do that. So I have a view on big data specifically. So insurers will tell you, every insurer will tell you they've been doing big data for years. So we've always done big data. Since the 50s we've done big data. And there's some truth in that sentiment. But the amount of data is what's changing and what has changed. So just the computing power's got cheaper, storage has got cheaper, so therefore the amount of information that you now have to be able to make decisions on has gone up through the roof. And for us, that's what big data is. It's not changing what you do with it, because every insurer will model based on risk or based on sales, but it's looking at more sources, more correlations, and if you have a technology platform which can allow that to happen. So part of our investment was about opening up our systems to this information. So we bring it in, we model it, we bring in another source and we model it again, and we're comparing those two models. So we're understanding the value in model A versus model B, and I think that's where we start to differ from a traditional insurance paradigm, is that we're now looking at these relatively unrelated sources as part of our quotation process. Now, to put it into kind of context, I had a look at a system that I worked on 10 years ago. So I'm not old, I don't think. But 10 years ago, I was working on an insurance platform, and it had about 120,000 or so customers, and our database at the time was around 50 gig in size. Now, 10 years ago, that was a big old database. That took a bit of managing that sort of database. Today, in production, we're operating over 20 terabytes worth of storage. And that's constantly being increased. So we're increasing I'll give you some numbers in a second, but we're increasing the amount of information almost exponentially. And with that, all of our technology has to shift underneath that. Why is that important? So, well, if data's cheap to store and more available, the more of it you have, the more accurate your models can be. The more models you've got. And as an insurer, the more models that we have and the more accurate our models are, the more money we make. Data has a tangible value when you look at it this way. Rather than treating it as an offline part of your modelling, let's analyse the performance last week. We're now analysing next week's performance. We're analysing next month's performance, because we have so much information that our statistical models get more and more accurate. And our underwriters will tell you that those statistical models are as good as fact. And we do have the numbers that kind of back that up. So, our market, I won't worry too much about this because that's some of our trade secrets, so don't write it down. Our market is very fluid, so our customers are very, very price sensitive, particularly in the UK. And we get 400,000 of these requests per day, which is utterly ridiculous if you think about the number of vehicles on the road, but 400,000 is what we get. Each one of those 400,000 is enriched, and it's enriched by data external to the group. So we will look at partners. So we might use a credit provider, we might use a grey data provider. There are a number of different providers that we use, and we don't always use the same ones for each quote. And then we enrich internally. So we look at our own internal data and we say, well, if everybody in the market has got all of this, because everybody has access to the same partners and ultimately will converge on the same price, you'd think, what do we have that's different? And what First Central have that's different is we have our data. And that's something that nobody else has got. And so we treat our data with the same value as we would do a third party's data. So each of those 400,000 is coming down this route. We're enriching it to turn the 40 or so that we get from Money Supermarket or Confused into about 3,000, give or take. And we're priced on 3,000. A traditional insurer, maybe 200. Maybe 250, something like that. So we think this is a particular advantage for us. It's complicated, and it means our models are complicated, but there's real value there. There's real value in those correlations. We turn that into a price. So that's our underwriting price, our burn cost. But that's not all we do with that information. The second part of our journey is is the marketing element. So once we've worked out, based on all these correlations and all this big data, what our price should be for that risk, what we can then do is look at how we sell it. So we have a secondary part of our process, which is using the same information, but now also including the price, to determine what's the best way of distributing this particular risk, this one unique risk out of all those 400,000, to this particular customer. How do we think that that's going to give us the best conversion? How do we think it's going to avoid them phoning our call centre? Because that costs us money. Put them to the website. That's free, nearly free. We do all of that analysis with every single one of our quotes. So, given all of that, and given where we believe our competitive advantage is, it's worth just bringing it back down to the reality of the world, which is 400,000 quotes. We only sell 1,200 policies per day from 400,000 quotes. So we've got to be really, really good at this. This is something that we invest significant amount of time, effort, and money in being good at. So, where am I? We'll come on to a little bit about our platform in a minute. For us, looking internally and externally is really important. It's important part of our culture. So every part of the business has got to understand that its data and its interpretation adds value into our machine. So our silos have to give back. So when they're taking all this information and interpreting what it means, so our counter fraud department who work out that Johns in Guernsey are particularly unscrupulous, they've got to give that information back to the underwriters, to the marketeers. We've got to find a mechanism to allow that to happen. And our change control process is designed to support that. So our platform focus is comprised of, there are 10 different products. They're all independent. They all produce a lot of information. So when on the previous diagram where I was showing where we did that enrichment, 1,200 policies a day travel through this platform. But this platform produces 2 million data updates per day. And that's really important to us because those data updates provide the context under which something happened. So we're not just looking at we sold a policy, we're looking at how we sold that policy. We're looking at the fact that the customer did their first quote on Confused, then they decided to shop around and go to Money Supermarket. Maybe then they clicked through to the website and they played around with their ancillaries a little bit. They then phoned the call centre because they wanted to discuss something on our frequently asked questions. They then come back the next day to buy their policy on their sister's credit card. We see all of that data. We don't just see the final state policy. And that's what I was saying before about that contextual information and how adding that back into our pricing mechanisms and our sales mechanisms start to drive new value in that existing data. And that's really important to us as a business. And one of the main reasons, I guess, why we've landed here. We've landed with this bespoke technology that does that, which has taken advantage of cheap storage. It's taken advantage of that cheap compute, which 10 years ago even you wouldn't have done this, because it would have been cost prohibitive to build a system that dealt with this volume of data. Yet today, this is where we're at, and I only see this growing in terms of more and more information and more accuracy. So those big data principles, I guess, if you want to call it like that, which are applied to our system architecture, make our business model feasible. And it's something that we've adapted into. It's not where we started. So all of that information, all of our quotation stuff is used to A/B test. So one of the things First Central do very well is we validate what we're doing. It's a continuous cycle. So this A/B testing of, does this presentation work better than that presentation? What if we move this ancillary up? And this is not broad brush across the market. This is, we want Nick to see this ancillary, but we want John to see something different. That's the level of granularity, fidelity that we have within our information. So we've touched on pricing, we've touched on marketing. I could talk for a long time about both those subjects. The other one that I promised to talk about was counter fraud. So with a digital business, 24/7, we can't have people sat watching every single transaction. I've painted you a picture of how we see all this information. In that, unfortunately, We do have customers who try to manipulate us. We have, I think our underwriters would have you believe that every insurer tries to manipulate every other insurer to try and work out what their prices are. I suspect it's not like that. But irrespective, when you're putting your business out there like that, you've got to provide mechanisms to protect it. So for us, that mechanism is data. Everything we need to understand is in our data. So if you're a customer and you come onto our website and you do a what if, so what if I bought a BMW, or what if I had a Mini, what if I add my wife to my policy? All of those are legitimate uses, legitimate ways that you could manipulate the system. Because what you're really trying to understand is what's your best price, which is fair enough. But if you're changing your date of birth, or you're changing your occupation, or you're looking, maybe your car's parked on a drive today, but it's not parked on a drive tomorrow. Those are things that we look at, and over the big data set can be indicative of fraud. So what we're looking at is we're looking at those correlations between things that potentially could be missed or historically would have been missed. If you're only looking at final state, i.e. the policy that's been purchased, how do you know how it got from point A to point B? Did a customer tell you they had 9 years no claims, then they had 11 years no claims? Now, what does that tell you about the customer? Is it a genuine mistake? So we use algorithms to decide that, and those algorithms, I won't tell you too much about them, but they are award-winning. As a business, we keep winning awards for our stance and our approach to counter fraud. And it's not just technical, but technology plays a massive part in our ability to do that. So, finally, I've got to talk about this. I don't know. I'm sorry I missed this morning. Like I said, I had some important calls to take. GDPR is going to really change us. So unfortunately, and fortunately, because I guess it's good governance is good for business overall, it has to change the way that we process and manage our data. I mean, fundamentally change it. So that picture I've just painted with all this information flying around, we've got to get much, much smarter at how we manage it, where we transfer it, what we use it for. However, we also have the advantage that we have our own system. So we actually are quite well placed, I think, to maintain our commercial advantage, yet still keep within the law. GDPR is a problem for some organisations, I suspect. I think you've probably all got GDPR programs running. Those that haven't are in a better place than we are. We've got to take this stuff seriously. It is important, but it is good for business. Protecting your data properly, understanding where it is and who's got access to it. All of those are good things to have, especially as you start moving and start, like ourselves, 20 terabytes worth of storage. We've got to know where it is and we've got to protect it properly. For me, and we touched on this, I think you touched on this, didn't you? The movement of businesses into data creates a new way of operating. So I talked before about modelling next week and next month. People have been doing that in financial services for ages, but they're basing it on numbers, on aggregate numbers. What we're trying to do is we're trying to base it on vast data sets. So these, everybody's heard the term data lakes, or data oceans, if you want to call it like that. The ability to manage and manipulate and model that data is a skill in its own right. So if you take that skill and you add coding knowledge, you end up with data science. And for First Central, that's where we're investing our time and effort. So I think we do some very cool things really, really well at the moment. And yet we know that that's where it's at. So that combination of statistical and mathematical modelling with code to produce algorithms and machine learning methods can drive significant new value that you just don't have the time to find. It's not that you can't find it, it's just you don't have the time. Your data sets are too big. You would need an army of people analysing that, and yet there's technology out there that can do it for you. And so data science, finding the question rather than proving the hypothesis. So a model will prove the hypothesis, data science will help you find the question in the first place. And so for us, that's where our investment is, in data science, in the technology underpinning that data science. And we'll be investing, I would imagine, now that we've got our technical investment out of the way, we'll be investing in this for the foreseeable, as data is more and more accessible. So for Guernsey, well, if that's where I think it's at for us, then we need to create a landscape in Guernsey that promotes these skill sets. So these skill sets aren't just about pointy-hatted data scientists, because they're important, but there's a whole suite of other services that you need around that to support this mechanism. So you need people who understand really, really large systems, really, really, really large databases. We need those skills. We need people who can understand the value of data. We need those skills. We need people who can understand the interaction between data and computer systems. We need those skills too, as well as the people who can take advantage of all that, those commercial people. We need all of those as well. So within Guernsey, creating a landscape where young people, as they come up through the education system, understand that businesses like ours, and I'm sure like yours, are going to be moving down into this space. You're going to be taking more information, making modeling decisions, starting to almost take a theoretical approach to how you run your business, using machine learning or AI to help you make decisions. That's where our investment should be. Our investment should be in those young people so that they see that this is there, because I think this is really exciting. When I first started my career, I was into the nuts and bolts of servers. Then I moved on to networks. Then I moved on to software. I thought, this is it. This is where I'm going to die. This is my future. The future's not in those things. The future's in data. And so our young people need to see that too, and see that this jurisdiction has those capabilities, and it has businesses like ours and Northern Trust doing some really cool things. We were lucky enough to welcome 5 young people as part of the Startup Guernsey internship. And I think that was a revelation for us as a business, but as well as them for individuals. They're ambitious, they're smart, and they didn't know there were businesses like ours doing stuff like this. And so, really, off the back of that, I hope they really enjoyed themselves. We enjoyed having them here. But I also hope that they took away from that they can go to uni, and there is opportunity back in Guernsey for them to come back and do those cool things. I'm not saying financial services is not cool, but fintech's way cooler. So, my final slide, I thought I'd put it up now. For Guernsey, obviously we've been punching above our weight for many years in our financial services piece. The finance industry, the insurance industry, they're all ripe for exploitation, if you want to call it like that. Fintech is where it's at for us as a business. So, there's a reason why why FCG presents itself as a fintech business here, is because that's where we see the opportunity for growth. There are lots of insurers who can provide underwriting capability, but if you can attach good counter fraud, you can attach good retail marketing principles to that traditional archaic insurance process, then you create a business that's way more valuable than it would be just as an insurance company. Cloud-based systems remove barriers. So platform technology like ours can allow us to deploy systems that span a regulatory landscape. And we can do that from Guernsey. So when I'm asked about why we do it from here, it's because we live in a beautiful place, because my kids get to grow up in a really safe, stunning environment. And actually everything we need is right here. We've got fantastic technical connectivity. So the islands are really well connected in terms of their pipes to and from. They're resilient. We have multiple ways in and ways out. Getting data to and from the island is okay. We've got good data sovereignty rules. We've got some good hosting companies out here who can help us do all those things. There are some risks we shouldn't ignore. So I've painted a picture of this exponential use of data. So moving from my 50 gigabyte system 10 years ago to my 20 terabyte system today, the cost of internet connectivity is going to become a constraint if we don't invest in that as a jurisdiction. Because if we're going to try and bring businesses like ours here to run their business from here, we've got to allow them to trade effectively across this digital landscape. So although the costs have come down, and they have come down over the last few years, we need to keep bringing them down, because the amount of data we're going to need is going to keep going up. So we're going to have to invest in that, and that's going to have to be a combination of both government and private industry to make that feasible for us all. But if we do that, we can do this really well. So, thank you.